Welcome back to the Truth Over Comfort show. Last video, we showed a clip and some context around Liz Truss getting questioned at a parliamentary committee about our relationship with the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. She keeps condemning Russia and China for being authoritarian. And this guy actually asked that any normal person would ask outside of the establishment media and parliament, really, on a consistent basis. Well, how would you describe the Gulf states? He brings up Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist, getting killed by Saudi Arabia, the 81 beheadings in one day, not just capital punishment, lethal injection like in America, whacked around the neck, just like you're in medieval times, which is just crazy. And, have you brought up any human rights abuses? It's funny to watch her squirm. There is no proper answer. It is indefensible, other than they've been a good ally over the years. And obviously the thing they don't say well is obviously we sell them a lot of arms. And Russia and China are our main focus, and they can be a partner. There is no real answer without sounding like a monster and supporting, stoning of homosexuality and, basically just the least free place you can go, which is why no one goes to Saudi Arabia on holiday. They might go to the UAE, Dubai and stuff because they've, made it a little bit better. No one's going to Saudi Arabia, and so people basically finding out some of it because they're going to go for the Qatari World Cup. But that is not the topic of discussion today. It is a policy of government to government, the continuity of government of being allies with Saudi Arabia basically since their founding. And this is another thing close to the heart of the British system and establishment, which is oil, as it is in many countries. There's probably a more special relationship here than certain other countries, other than probably America. So this is an article we're going to be looking at. We're not going to be reading through it. I've taken all most of the information out I need to show you, but this is where I got the bulk of it for. So I'd give credit and give it a read if you like in written form. So this is an article by Declassified UK and Mark Curtis. I recommend reading his books. I've read a couple of them, and I recommend following this. This is a great if you want foreign policy, colonialism of Britain, and corporate interests, which we're going to be covering today. So the article is dozens of UK former senior officials profit from fossil fuel corporations rubber stamped by a Whitehall committee. So just before we get into it, this is a committee basically when you leave your government position or civil service and you want permission to go on the board of BP, Shell, or whatever private country it is, you have to go through them. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, ACABA. And from the looks of in this article, everyone seems to get the permission. It's obviously meant to be some sort of watchdog to prevent some of the stuff we're going to discuss today. So what you got to understand, and this isn't all BP and Shell, but BP and Shell are basically more than a century old oil companies. And Britain has been one of the biggest, basically in the lead with America for over a century of having the biggest oil companies with the best deals and things like that. And not only are BP and Shell one of the biggest oil companies in the world, top 5, top 10, one of the biggest, they're also one of the biggest corporations by revenue in the world. So if we go here, but this is revenue, so not net profit. As you can see, Walmart is at the top with 560 billion, but BP and Shell are 18th and 19th in the world, obviously both UK. Shell's Anglo-Dutch, and they're the only two British corporations with the highest revenue on this list of 50. Most of them are American, Chinese, most American. So you got to look at it as well. Britain is in the G7. We're one of the biggest GDPs in the world. We want to maintain that. So to maintain that, you've got to play ball with our biggest corporations, which are BP and Shell. They also happen to be oil companies, which means it's not a corporation here, that owns loads of brands and subsidiaries and stuff like that. They are drilling resources out of where? Other countries. They're not getting it from here. We're not resource-rich country. So in the Middle East and stuff, they're going to be drawn into there. They obviously have a history there. But it can mean going on ventures pushed by them and our government that maybe the public won't want. And we can discuss a couple of the, the likelihoods of that and just, the nature that government officials, military, intelligence, all swimming with people leaving, going on to there, but also coming from there, and just, their influence on, advising the government on things and all that good stuff. So we're gonna one of the reason this caught my eye was the last three heads of MI6, our intelligence service, the SIS, have gone on to a gas company. Interesting. In America, they have a revolving door. Generals go to, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, they go to arms corporations. This article a lot is oil. I'm sure there's some that, you could probably write an article for them going to arms corporations as well. And a couple of them, they do both. Don't worry. They got the oil and the arms covered. But, it's not great, because you wonder, do they get the sit on that board because while they was in office they lobbied, or for them getting a contract, or taking money obviously for that, or actually pushing for a war? Have they pushed for us to go to Iraq? Have plenty of wars over the years can be, arms corporations need to make money and they like conflict. So that's the worry. Or do they get hired because of networking, because you're the head of MI6 or a general, you speak to a lot of NATO countries, allied countries, you have a lot of influence in the government, everyone you need. So do they lean on them? And they could even advise on some of the geopolitical situations. Maybe that's a perfectly reasonable explanation for them hiring them. But when there's just a pool of just then it's just what becomes one system, and they all in it for the benefit of each other. Because you've got to look at, especially with oil, the government makes a lot of money from tax on that, because they take about 45%, which is why probably, we talked about Liz Truss before, and old Richie Sunak. I've got a shell garage down the road, which I always like to look at because it annoys me every time it's going up. At the moment, we've got, everywhere in Europe and America has got a bit of a, cost of living crisis, and petrol prices out of control. So what does old Richie Sunak do? Oh, well, I know it's 40p over already, but, just for you guys, in 2 days, we're going to make, old Bernie Looney from BP, and I can't remember the show guy, we're gonna make him put down 5p. It needs to go down like 30p, but sure. We give it 2 days. I look over, well, Shell put it up in between that. And then within 24 hours of them, they put it down 5p. Nice little drop. They put it back up, maybe not all the way, but some of the way, literally after 24 hours. I don't know if Richie Sunak's even like literally giving them a call before. Don't worry, lads. This is an empty threat. It's just, give something to throw a bone to the public, and we're not gonna. There's no like, oh, you got to keep it down 5p for a couple of weeks. You don't even have to wait 2 days, just 24 hours. But I guess Richie Sunak was enjoying a lot of the tax they got from that. Maybe, I don't know. It's pretty hard to tell if maybe they're like, well, lockdown, they lost loads of profits, which the oil companies did, because not as many people are driving. Because we'll throw you a bone, you put them really high, we won't do much about it, and we're both going to make a lot of money. Maybe, I don't know. But BP especially is at the heart of the government, as I mentioned in other ones, and I should do a video on it. In 1953, MI6 and the CIA overthrew Mohammed Mossadegh because he nationalized the oil company. And they put in the Shah of Iran, a dictator for 26 years. So when they're like, oh, we're doing it for democracy, and oh, well, maybe he has a communist leaning, and we support democracy, well, we're going to get Kermit Roosevelt's cousin. He's the head of the Middle Eastern part of the CIA. We're going to overthrow the democratically elected leader who we so love democracy and elections, and put in the Shah of Iran, a dictator who was brutal till about 1979 when he was overthrown, not by us. So there's a long history. I'm going to do a video on it because I brought up every time. You can go, I'll put it in the links. CIA Reading Room has stuff about it, the National Security Archive. Even Kermit Roosevelt wrote a book, and he describes in detail the operation of what they did. And Winston Churchill saying it would have been great to be on the operation with him because he was prime minister at the time, of course. And an imperialist, Winston Churchill wasn't imperialist. He's from an older time. Imperialism was still obviously still alive and well. We just don't use that word. So MI6 were obviously part of that overthrow of the CIA for oil, and that Anglo-Iranian company, oil company, becomes part of BP. So since the start, BP has been helped by MI6, but of course, economic interests is the national security. There's going a threat to our national security. Mossadegh was a threat to our national security because he was communist. He was a threat to our economic interests, which is a threat to our empire, and etc. So a lot of history there. I'm not going to go in it, but MI6 still sitting on boards of BP after they leave. Not much has changed since 1953, which is always nice. So I'm going to start with two examples from this article. Sir John Sawyers, Chief of the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, from 2009 to 2014. He has been an independent non-executive director of BP since 2015. So he's our first. Well, there was ones before him. He's one of our heads of MI6 who went on to an oil company. He went to BP. So you can click on the links here. I've already done it. So as you can see, they're not just making this up. This is BP's website, and he was an independent non-executive director. So what gets me is, well, they're never like on one board. They got to be on like 8. They're just on everything. So colleges, Chatham House, big think tank funded by who? Probably BP, actually. Oil companies, arms, banks, foundations, all the people, governments. Global Advisor Council for Relations, which is basically the American counterpart of that. There's a lot of history there. Oh, he's also director of the Bilderberg Association. Oh, we did a video on that the other day, didn't we? And who was he there with? So ex-MI6 chief, sitting on the board of BP, is there with the head of the BP, the head of GCHQ, the head of CIA, head of NATO, National Security Council, people from America, and they're all just there having a great time. Who else? Oh, Ed Shell, who's there? Don't worry, Google, all the people you love. So he's still, swimming around with intelligence figures at a weekend in a hotel privately for 3 days, talking about all that good stuff. Head of Prime Minister of Finland's there, talking to the NATO Secretary General about joining NATO. You've got the King of Holland and the Prime Minister. But go check that video out. But, interesting to see. What else is interesting about John Sawyers? Is John? That was. Oh, it's John. Yeah, John. What was he doing around, early 2000s before MI6? The Blair times. Well, he, for 3 months, was the British government's special representative in Baghdad, assisting in the establishment of a coalition provisional authority of the transitional government during the occupation of Iraq. So he's MI6, loads of different things he's involved in here, of course. But, around the Iraq invasion. Well, that's interesting. I'm not going to think much of that. Be interesting. 2009, it's BP's website again. Everything will be in the show notes, linked up, don't worry. In 2009, BP became the first international oil company to return to Iraq after a 35-year period. It was the first. Right. Make a note of that. Between 2003 and 2006, BP conducted a technical evaluation of the Rumalia field with the Ministry of Oil. So no one's not there for 35 years. So all during Saddam Hussein's reign. Interesting. And the second this invasion starts, they already, got a deal with the government to do a technical evaluation of this oil field. So it's not like, 6 years in, the second, the war starts, they're in there. I'm sure you could find many stuff, maybe them lobbying part of the Iraq war, but there were so many special people like, the Iraq war, it's just about oil, man, all about oil. Well, no, it's not. I'm sure oil was a factor because BP benefited here, but there's a regional presence, general hatred of getting Saddam Hussein out. The good people who actually did it because they thought, they did it for 9/11, the war on terror, or because he's a dictator. But then, people playing empire, obviously regional presence, bases, arms corporations, being regional presence as well isn't just about having a foot there for the deal. It's about borders, countries around them having an influence there. So there's so many different reasons, and the army need something to do as well, keep that budget up. But it's interesting, the second it starts, they're evaluating. It wasn't doing it in 2001, was they? No. And in 2009, BP and PetroChina, which is interesting, were awarded a technical service contract. Not sure on the Chinese angle here. So that's interesting. So Sir John Sawyers was, in the government, part of this transition government, and they're, the first oil company to get it. So someone has to lobby for that. Doesn't mean BP had to have lobbied for the war, but to be the first oil company to return to Iraq. There's a whole list of American, British, and some other countries. Obviously, they're the biggest force, part of Iraq's invasion, so they're going to get all the best spoils of the war, of course. They was the first. BP do have a big presence in America, so it's not just our British company got in there first, because America was the bigger player, as always. But that's worth knowing. So he was part of that transitional government. Maybe he was in there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Well, let's go back to the article. And we've got another interesting link here with Iraq. Current BP advisor and also a shareholder until recently, you see, in the company is Lloyd George Robertson, a Labour defense secretary in the late 90s who went on to become NATO Secretary General. And he was also a non-executive chair of BP Russian Investments. Interesting there. So again, I've got it all open. So it's always funny. Labour, Conservative, they're both involved in this. But if you're sitting in the House of Lords, you're a NATO Secretary General, and even the defence, probably not really Labour, not really the working class sort of representative. You're more Conservative, unless they're saying the House of Lords becomes normal plumbers and your average Joe. Well, that would be a bit better. As you can see here, he was an advisor to BP until 2022. And he was also a shareholder until April 2022. Maybe he, no, the Russian-Ukraine thing is where he started there. Again, why is this interesting? Coincidental? Maybe. It's a British politician, so this is a Wikipedia page. So when was he the NATO Secretary General? 1999 to 2004. So now we've got two people knocking around NATO Secretary General is an extremely Europe, extremely influential position to be in at the start of the Iraq War and even a year inwards. So he goes on to BP and has shares in it. I don't know if he had shares in it when it started. I'd like to actually find that. It just says seized, so I don't know. Why can't it say when it started? That would be good, unless it was. I don't know when that could be. And then you've got the MI6 chief who was at the time in a role, obviously speaking to the transitional government of Iraq. Both knocking them out at the same time. Both end up on BP's board. BP get a deal in Iraq. A lot of coincidences here. Is it definitive? No. It's interesting, worth a note, worth investigating. And, you could say, again, for networking, their, NATO Secretary General, House of Lords, pretty big positions there, probably knows a lot of people, still has influence. I'd say even if it's networking of people they did know, they can, as in like speaking to people in foreign countries to get these drilling deals, but then also influence still now, still has influence of the people in our current government who they can, lobby or speak to, because of course lobbying is legal if it's for a third party. In America, I'm pretty sure that's the same here. I have to check that. That's just, there's in this article there's not another example of this. There may be, but we'll do another one. So we got General Nick Houghton, who was the chief of the defence staff, Britain's most senior military officer in 2013-16. Where does he go? So this is on the Aqaba ACOB advisory council on whatever it was. It doesn't matter. Have I got it over? No. So the committee agrees that this commission is permissible within the terms of your independent consultancy, which is described as advising at board level on corporate leadership, operating model enhancements, and geopolitical risk. The first one's at corporate leadership. If he was in the military, why would he know about corporate? He'd know about leadership. Corporate, though? Operating model enhancement. That sounds, these first two sound made up. But geopolitical risk, sure. He should have some good knowledge of geopolitical risk. They're drilling in Africa and the Middle East. There's tensions with neighbors. They could be good at advising that, sure. But also the British Army and intelligence agencies normally the ones stirring up trouble between these countries and causing wars. So if you got a drilling, if you're BP or Shell, I'm not saying they did, and you're drilling, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, you've got the Serbian Kosovo bombing of NATO. You've got Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. All this conflict, maybe affecting Israel, even Ukraine. NATO expansion, and just targeting Russia. I'm not justifying their invasion, definitely not. But a lot of these tensions have been built up by us, so maybe you can give them a heads up. But also, the geopolitical risk of being in Iraq, and then going to Iraq because there's conflict. Well, you got the drilling deal because of the war, and that's why there is conflict. So it's quite funny to look at that. So who we got next? All right. So this is right. We just actually swap these around. So I told you the last three MI6 heads have all gone to an oil company, which is quite interesting in a row. So we done Sir John Sawyer's, BP, Bilderberg. He was advising the new Iraq government for Britain, or being part of the transition. And this is Sir Richard Dearlove, and this is Cosmos Energy, which is an American oil company. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because the other two, they have some interesting circumstances. Maybe these do. They went to BP, which is a British company. He's gone to an American, so you got to wonder that. Obviously, Britain and America have pretty tight relationship, special relationship, and all, especially the intelligence services. Richard Moore, the current MI6 head, actually spoke about how it's probably the closest within the intelligence, not companies, organizations. They're probably the closest and share basically everything. Probably the same with GCHQ and NSA. We saw with Edward Snowden's leaks about how there wasn't just NSA, GCHQ was involved in that, and even MI5 are caught up in that. I can't remember what it's called, and it was about they wanted to basically get something on your smart TV so they could spy on you. I wonder if it's called like something Angel. I can't remember. I'll try and find it another time. So let's go to our next ex-head of MI6, Sir John Scarlett. Now we go back after. Sir John Scarlett, Chief of Secret Intelligence Service, October 2009. So he goes to Statoil, which is a Norwegian oil company, which is it's kind of north of us, so it maybe makes sense. Again, Sir Richard Dearlove going to that Cosmos Energy in America, Scarlett going to this Norway company, I'm sure is not random. Maybe, again, networking. I'd like to know if there's any links, crossover of why maybe they did go to there. And, before I almost skipped past this when I clicked on this, is the government Aqaba report. What's this? Oh. Member of the board of directors at the Times newspaper. MI6. Completely secretive. Have propaganda units. Use them. Newspaper. Man, oversee these organizations. Check their power. Who are meant to be about, freeing up the information and informing us. He's sitting on their board. MI6, literally one of the most secretive organizations in the world. Even the CIA has a reading room, declassified stuff, has gone on, done interviews. Richard Moore, the current MI6 head, I think was the first one to ever do an interview. I don't know if they even had a website before. They're doing all these marketing thing. They're trying to play into this, trying to be more free and woke, and they did some woke stuff too, pretty gay to be honest. CIA, actually maybe that was the CIA. Well, they're both the army. They're trying to play into that community, with the rainbow colors. And there's always the joke about, these countries getting bombs, and oh, it's fine. We've got rainbow colored bombs, and we're saying all this, nice stuff. They don't care if you're woke or not. If you're bombing them, they're gonna think you're a murderer. It's like the joke about the Democrats and Republicans and with the colors, and that's all the difference is the color of the bomb. I'm not saying they actually painting rainbow colors of the bomb. But again, so if the Times newspaper thought, oh, it'd be good to have someone from MI6 just after they finish. No, we're not like, 20 years, he's got a lot of knowledge. He's just stepped down from MI6 and they've gobbled him up like hungry hippos. But he's not going to, he's going to squash information. Is he there because either one, the Times has hired him because they think he could be useful in geopolitical issues, or if they hide him because they support these wars, they support the establishment. The Times is obviously one of the most establishment newspapers in Britain, and they're going to support stuff. So maybe they want him. I don't know if he's going to be slightly conspiratorial. Like, do they want him to help them? Propagandize the public. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just really strange to see an ex-head of MI6 sitting on a newspaper who are meant to inform us. MI6 don't inform us on anything. They're James Bond. They're hidden. They don't say nothing. CIA admits their role in overthrowing Iran 1953. MI6, no, people don't get declassified comments. They don't have a reading room. CIA has a reading room. You can go look at documents. We don't have that. But don't worry. He's gone to the Times because he just loves free speech. He wants you to know all Britain's secrets. He's joined there because he's going to, write up all the stuff that we got up to. I don't think so. Anyway, I've sort of gone on a bit there. Okay, now, so this is the head of GCHQ. So let's go back to this article quickly. Where's intelligence links hiding? Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Nope. Okay, so we've done these. So actually, sorry, I was right to be where I was before. So actually, I skipped someone. Mark Allen, the head of MI6's head of counter-terrorism unit, who had extensive links with Libyan intelligence, blah, blah, blah. So he's not the head of MI6, he's the head of the counter-terrorism unit, and he also went to BP. So that is a lot of people from intelligence going to BP. Yeah, you can see here on his little university outlet. But what I wanted to do was go to the next one. So we've covered MI6, and now we've got the other side. We've got GCHQ, which is, if you're in America, it's NSA. And his name's Sir Ian Robin, and he became an advisor to Shell. The article didn't actually include, it went to an article in The Guardian. You want to do, it was useful to find out with this committee because they have to publish every time a government official, goes to these positions. So what I did was I typed in his name, typed in Shell and Aqaba, and it came up, which is great. So this is a great way to check. You can just type in any. Well, actually, no, you need to find out where they went first. But if you want, the primary source, you can go here. So here you go, Royal Dutch Shell 2015. So you understand maybe GCHQ person going to cyber security because they're all working in data, cyber, and stuff like that. But he's gone to Shell. Interesting. It's quite random. But this is where it gets you like, oh, well, they're going there for networking and, they can help them. Well, if you're on like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 boards. How can you throw your work into, Shell? They want you to try and, connect with this person here. How many phone calls and meetings can you attend when you're on 9 different boards, all doing really important stuff? Or are you just collecting a paycheck? Are you being rewarded for something you did, like, John Sawyer's or Lord Robertson? Did he help, Iraq get that first, sorry, BP get that first Iraq uh, oil contract? And then we just stick you on a board, give you 500 grand a week, you rock up to 1 million. Sometimes we give you a call if we need a help with networking, but it's a reward for what you did in your service. Not sure. So this was the head of MI5, and they went to BG Group, an oil company, who then got taken over by Shell, which is just great. So I'm not going to go through everything in this article. There's plenty of they made a little chart of all the different ones who went where, and I've checked that, I haven't checked every single link of the ones I didn't look at. All the ones I have, all correct. And the great thing, as I said, it goes back to this government website. So you've obviously got a lot of foreign office people go into different oil companies, intelligence, military, and ministers, and then you've got them going from the corporation to the government. So not only that, you've got, so let's just find where they said this, because I do want to give them credit for the bits that I'm using. So last month, Boris Johnson established a new business council to advise the government on post-COVID economic recovery. One of those members, so this is in 2021. Bernard Looney, BP's current chief executive, is part of this. Nothing new. Oh, well, maybe they're just getting, this business guy because they need help post-COVID. Well, Bob Dudley, the previous chief, was on David Cameron's. So I'll just show you that. So Bernard Looney. So it's not just BP, they got all the prime ministers, chancellors, new business council. So they do it in America as well. So look, they got BP, British Airways, BT, Google, HSBC. They got a lot. Tesco's, Unilever, which is massive, Visa. But same as before, BP are there. It's interesting. BP seem to be more in it than Shell, maybe because they're more British, and Shell are Anglo-Dutch, and they also, maybe their shareholder system's less British as well. Because I know BlackRock have, I don't know if it's 40% or 14. I'll check that later. And then we've got, who we got here? So he was, let's go back to the article. BP's chief scientist, Dame Angle Strank, who worked for the corporation for 35 years, currently serves on Boris Johnson's Industrial Infrastructure Manufacturing Business Council. So again, it's just they're just swarming around. Here we go. And so this is one for Shell. He worked as a diplomat for Britain for many years. He now sits on a board at Shell, and I don't know if at the same time, but he's also on a board at Raytheon. So he was the one who's got both covered. Ian Davis was appointed a non-executive board member for the Cabinet Office. He is also an independent non-executive for BP Johnson Johnson. Great to see Johnson Johnson. Thomas Riley, he was British ambassador to Morocco. He sits on a board for Shell, and the list could go on and on and on, but I don't want to go too far. But again, this chart, there's just loads here. I'd say BP is probably more popular, but there's a lot of Shell here from going from corporation to the government, which is interesting. But it's not just BP and Shell. There's other oil companies, as you saw with a couple of the people from MI6. But it's just crazy. I mean, I'm sure you could find more. And this is, just recent. You could go back years and years and years, and I'm sure it's a similar position. I'd like to see one for arms corporations too. I don't want to go overboard, but you could say, because Britain, obviously, I'm saying even for the Iraq thing, they don't have to lobby John Sawyer's and Lord Robertson, the NATO Secretary General, Britain would have been lobbying to get it there. You know, they've put in their new government. Them America want to reap the economic benefits of obviously privatizing their oil and things like that. So it doesn't, you know, I'm not saying Sir John Suez, he was the sole person. Did he have a part of it? Maybe. Was he the government official who helped get it through? Maybe. But it's in our own government's interest to push this as well. So, but it'll just be interesting to see how many, you know, end up getting rewarded of their service, and did they continue to push every single, you know, war, or every country that you know, there's a person involved who doesn't want to nationalize their own resources, like Mohammed Mossadegh. How dare he want to, you know, take away the profits from the Anglo-Iranian company where it all pretty much goes to us? How dare he do that? It seems like it's similar. They want those resources privatized. Libya is a great example. I plan to do a video on that soon, because in Hillary Clinton's private emails is just all about us, France, Italy, Sweden, America, but especially us and France, just completely trying to get all our oil companies in after overthrowing. And it was one of the main reasons we did it, according to her her private emails. This is like, she's not just saying, she's saying this privately. She doesn't know anyone's reading it. And a lot more frank behind the scenes. It's not about human rights, is it? It's ridiculous. Economic interests push it, because all, you know, all the capitalist countries, especially the West, do, you know, want to keep their economies on top. And if you don't have resources, you know, a lot of the resources are in South America and Asia. The West isn't got the most resources themselves, like lithium and things like this. They want to get their hands on it. But it's completely tied in with our government. So who knows how much they, you know, certain person, they need to even be lobbied. I'm sure they pushed for it straight away. I'm sure you could find some stuff with Tony Blair there. But I think I'll leave it there. I'll put everything in the show notes. I will be putting it on my website after, on the media videos and interviews section. Check out the YouTube, like it, share it. But yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to, you know, keep it interesting, because I didn't want to do too much reading. But there you have it. The last three heads of MI6 all gone to an oil company. Two people at the time in 2003 of the Iraq invasion, who then obviously BP gets an oil deal, end up getting paid for them a few years later. And, you know, other GCHQ, MI5, they're all army government officials, or going from the corporations to there, or advising their government. So it's all one big happy family, and pushing their economic interests, of course, which probably leads the foreign policy at the end of the day. But thanks for listening to the Truth Over Comfort show, and I hope to see you soon.